Every Andrew Huberman dopamine tool from all of his podcasts in one 10-minute video. Let's get started. Starting with how Andrew Huberman explains how dopamine works. He always uses this analogy of the wave pool. And the wave pool represents our dopamine that's stored in our brain and body. We have a baseline level, which is very important for our constant state of motivation and ability to pursue our goals. Now, this analogy is good because waves represent the activities or the pursuit of activities that spikes our dopamine, often in the modern world unnaturally, and I'll share many ways and examples Andrew gives of that, which lead to a crash. And that crash of that wave causes water to spill out of the wave pool, which lowers our baseline level, meaning that that constant level of dopamine is now lower because you spiked your dopamine so much. And so that is the first tool, is to understand how dopamine works, because there's so many things in the modern world that unnaturally spike our dopamine that will cause this crash, and then we lose part of our baseline dopamine, which decreases our motivation. So, a few examples of these things include sugar, addictive food, processed sugar, pretty much. Fruit is not the same. Substances like drugs or alcohol, pornography, things on technology, video games, scrolling social media. But it can also be subjective, meaning there are things personal to you and I that will spike our dopamine that we need to be careful of. For example, Anna Lemke, who was a guest on multiple Andrew Huberman podcasts, who wrote the book Dopamine Nation, shares how she was addicted to romance novels, and that spiked her dopamine and messed with her motivation. So it's important to understand yourself. So when we have this reduction in baseline dopamine, what do we do to fix it? So the tool that Anna shares with Andrew is doing what's called a dopamine fast, or maybe from other people you may have heard of as a dopamine detox. And she recommends 30 days. And this is abstaining completely from the activity that you're addicted to, or that you have this habit of doing that is affecting your ability to do other things. And 30 days usually allows your brain's reward pathways to sort of reset. So your cravings will reduce for that thing, and you'll start to be able to enjoy and feel motivated to pursue other more effortful tasks that will improve your life. She says you will feel worse before you feel better. And she says that on average lasts for a few weeks. It can be very tough, but it's definitely worth it, if you're trying to increase your motivation to do other things. So some tools now to get through that dopamine fast, or just to increase your dopamine in general, starting with things that naturally increase your dopamine, are things like cold exposure. Andrew Huberman talks about this all the time. This can be done through a cold shower or a ice bath, or even just splashing water on your face to a degree. These things can increase your dopamine for a long time. There have been studies that show up to hours afterwards where it doesn't cause a crash. And going along with that, things that cause pain, require effort, create dopamine, and don't cause a crash. So you would think also exercise. This also creates dopamine. And you can think of it like it's hard to get into things like exercise or deep work But once you get into it, it's easier, and that's because that effort creates dopamine, and it doesn't cause a crash afterwards because of that. Now, some other things that are important for long-lasting dopamine and increasing your baseline are sleep, because sleep is when we replenish our stores of dopamine. Dopamine is then naturally highest in the morning because we haven't been using it up for different things. And so you want to try to do the most effortful tasks in the morning when you have the most motivation. Also, protein, specifically tyrosine, is the building block of dopamine. And so we need to be getting a nutritious diet to increase our baseline level. And of course, morning sunlight is also really important for setting these things in rhythm and for getting quality sleep, which then will allow us to replenish our dopamine. And also, I mentioned exercise, things that require work. Anything that requires effort is going to increase your dopamine naturally and not cause that crash that will reduce your baseline level. So he also talks about some supplements. I won't talk about this much, but if you want to look into it, there's L-tyrosine and phenylethylamine, if that's how you say it. And they increase dopamine for a short amount of time. From what Andrew said, about 30 minutes. Now, more importantly, in my opinion, are tools for getting through the dopamine fast or detox. So, number one, Anna Lemke, she talks about telling the truth, which sounds kind of odd. Why would that help you to quit your bad habits? And the reason for this is because it strengthens the connection between the reward part of your brain and your prefrontal cortex. So the reason this is so important is because if the prefrontal cortex is about planning, it's about delaying gratification for your long-term goals. And so if your dopamine, if your motivation is not connected to that, then you're going to be pursuing things that take such little effort, and you're not going to be able to delay gratification. Whereas if they're connected, you're going to be able to channel that dopamine towards things in the future that you really care about. And telling the truth strengthens the connection between those two parts of your brain. So trying to just tell the truth in all circumstances will help. Anna also talks about what's called binding. Binding behaviors or habits to certain times of the day or week or physical places. And this helps people to restrict those habits to certain times or places, making it easier to resist those things in other times or places. So, for example, with times, if you're trying to reduce your social media use, you can tell yourself, I can go on social media, but only during this 15 minutes at the end of the day, for example. And that will make it easier to resist the temptation of getting on social media during other times of the day. And thus, it will reduce the amount of spikes and crashes and reduction in your baseline level of dopamine. And another tool that Anna talks about, and Andrew Huberman a lot, is this idea of growth mindset. So effort and pursuing goals creates dopamine, as we've mentioned. And if we can actually, in our mind, think, okay, the pain of this fast from my old habits is helping me get to my goal, or whatever pain you're in, then that pain can now be a source of motivation of dopamine. That's sort of how growth mindset is, like accepting that or recognizing that this pain is helping you progress. Now, those are the main tools I found through watching all of Andrew Huberman's content. If you are interested in more tools on how to balance your dopamine, how to overcome your self-destructive habits, check out my free guide in the description of this video and subscribe to my channel for more.